This is the Outlap F1 podcast featuring America's own Cody, Andy, and Deanna. Your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. Join us on the Outlap. As one of our esteemed colleagues would always say, that was a race that happened. I feel like I have to conjure Deanna up after that one. We're going to get into what we saw in our first official race weekend of the year, 2026 Australian GP. Welcome on in. As always, we're glad you're here. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. Cody, we are still recording in the daylight due to the change to daylight savings time here in the U.S. But how's it hanging, and how'd you find your weekend so far?
It's been nice, been low-key. Got some beautiful weather here today in the Chicago area, so got outside and enjoyed it a little bit today. But yeah, we're recording in the daylight because this is one of the rare occurrences where the race is on a Saturday night for us. And works out well for us that we're not doing this in the wee hours of the night.
Yeah, it'll be hopefully means that if the internet is nice to me this time, and if you saw some of the preview stuff, we had some technical issues getting that episode to post. I think I have worked out all of the kinks in the various systems, and I think they're all linked and talking to each other the way they should be. So hopefully it should be smooth sailing from here on out. But if you have found our show, like I said before, welcome along. We're glad you're here. You can find us on X, on Blue Sky, Instagram, sometimes on Discord, Reddit, and of course here on YouTube at Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all that. If you enjoy what you're seeing and you like what you're hearing, do us a favor if you want to and click either the like and subscribe and then leave us a comment. That's how you generate some traction with algorithm there and helps us get our content to you a little bit quicker. If you are so inclined, your favorite podcasting app, we're also there. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. A 5-star review will also help us out in that regard, too. You can email the show, outlapf1@gmail.com. We'll get your thoughts to us. Thank you so much to those who continue to support our show. Y'all know this list well by now. Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Whitten Warden, Kevin Kelly, who was sipping on Jim Beam last night in the wee hours of the morning, and we were texting back and forth all weekend. He's been great. Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and of course, Jonathan Scott. If you'd like to join that esteemed list, I do put our Anchor link in our show notes, $1, $5. You don't have to give anything. We're just happy that you're listening to the show, to be quite honest with you. But if you'd like to, what we would use it for is just to reinvest into the show, keep the technology up and going so we can continue to bring this show to you. All right. Well, that was a weekend that was, if nothing else. Cody, I'll let you go first. We'll start with our headlines of the day. What you got here?
My headline is more data required. We went into the weekend all high on the exciting new prospects of new regulations, new engine regs, the fact that everyone was passing the buck in testing and saying, no, I'm not best, he's best. Well, it turns out the predictions that Mercedes were best were very, very on the mark. Went into qualifying, and by the end of that, I was like, Jesus Christ, these regulations suck. Everyone is slowing down and qualifying at the end of the straights, like lifting off like a second before they get to the braking zone, which is not cool. Mercedes is 0.8 out in front of the next best car. That really blows. It looks like George Russell's going to win the championship. And then we got to Sunday, and for the first half of the race, I was like, all right, this isn't so bad. This is actually kind of fun. The race start was nutty. Unfortunately, Oscar Piastri was not there to see it. But yeah, crazy race start. The going back and forth for the lead was pretty cool. But then second half of the race, I was back to being a downer and being like, God, these regs suck. George Russell's going to win everything.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much a very up and down. I think my mood would change given the time of the day, given the day that it was just very, very strange. So my headline of the day, and this was just how I felt after qualifying. This was my raw emotion. Was they lied to us. They all lied to us. Mercedes put a 1-over on, I think, the entirety of the grid. And look, could they do it? Did they engineer a great car for what these regs have? Yes. Did they optimize their engine far before everybody else? Absolutely. So superior engineering and intrinsic knowledge leads them to secure A 1-2 in qualifying that we thought was going to happen, but I don't think we figured it was going to be to that extent. And then a 1-2 in the race. And at least Ferrari made it interesting for a while. And as we'll get into, the good old decision desk decided to show up, and we not listening to our 7-time world champion. And Ferrari did some Ferrari things that kind of maybe cost them a win. Maybe they didn't care because maybe they thought they were just happy to be there. I don't know. But anyway, we will get into all of that. And as we shall start, we start with that qualifying. All right, that qualifying saw, not setting lap times, 2 due to technical issues and 1 due to a pretty horrific crash. There was no Lance Stroll. He did not participate, although he was allowed to start. He did not qualify under the 107% rules. That's the first time we've seen that invoked in a long time. Carlos Sainz had a very rough FP3. The engine literally stopped, and he wasn't able to get it repaired in time for qualifying. Max Verstappen was trying to set his first flying lap. He did not set a time because that lap was never completed because he had one heck of a wreck. Those who did finish, P19 was Valtteri Bottas in the Cadillac, P18 Sergio Perez in the other Cadillac. Probably an early surprise, if I'm being honest, in terms of qualifying form. 17 was Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, not in the back. Who saw that one coming? P16 was Franco Colapinto, P Alex Albon, and P14 Pierre Gasly. P13 Esteban Ocon, P12 Ollie Behrman, P11 was Nico Hulkenberg, P10 Gabriel Bortoleto in the other Audi. Your remaining top 10, Arvid Lindblad in the Racing Bulls comes home P9. P8 was Liam Lawson. P7, disappointing qualifying at this point for him. That was Lewis Hamilton. P6 was Lando Norris. P5 was Oscar Piastri. P4, Charles Leclerc. P3, probably the other star of qualifying, if I'm being honest, Isaac Hadjar in the Red Bull. Red Bull's second driver coming to play. What a concept. But it was not even close. The 2 Mercedes were far out front after that. Kimi Antonelli, a 118.811. But George Russell in the Mercedes, absolutely dominant when it mattered, a 118.518. All right, first qualifying in the books. Cody, what were your thoughts?
That it kind of sucked. And I spoke about this a little bit at the beginning, but there was a lot of aspects of this qualifying that made it feel like it was not real qualifying. It was not full flat out all the time around the lap, which kind of stunk. There was a lot of lifting and coasting going on around the quick laps, mostly to make sure that the battery actually stayed charged enough throughout the entirety of the lap. A lot of drivers lifting as much as far as I could tell, like 1 second before the braking zone, which is pretty crazy. And if you listen to the onboards to the cars, you can definitely hear when that max speed is reached and they start recharging, because you can hear the dip in the RPMs as that occurs. You had a lot of laps that we couldn't really tell if they were flying laps or not. It almost seemed like there's 2 out laps going on for a lot of the cars. They go out, they warm up, and then it was difficult to really tell what was going on in the broadcast because they'd put up their lap timers as if they were on a flying lap, and they're getting greens or purples because it's their first time out in this qualifying session. But then it turns out, oh no, they're really not pushing, at least not to the fullest. They're just trying to charge up the battery for the real push lap. So yeah, there was a little bit of weirdness going on there. And then obviously the big point is that Mercedes is, at least in qualifying, so clearly out in front of everybody else. I was watching the times in Q3, there at the end, and yeah, with how far out in front they were from everybody, I was like, dear God, this is just like 2014, maybe even worse. They're so far clear. They must have known this all along. It kind of gave that sense of, God, like, might as well just give George Russell the championship trophy now because nobody's going to catch him.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had like 4 big points out of here. And one is that the onboards can't lie, even though the sound kind of does, because what we're used to seeing is outlap, get the tires into the optimal window, push, and you can usually tell when someone's on a flyer versus a non-flyer. There were lots of times where I'm like, just like you said, they threw that lap away. Why'd they do that? It looks like they were setting green and maybe even purples there. Well, that's kind of weird. Oh, Okay, fine. All right. Well, this first sector, you could almost tell where turn one was. And I'm like, well, what the hell? They just screwed up the first turn. And so you're going to throw the whole rest of the lap away. Okay. That happens. I get it. No, it was hard to get into a rhythm. And I think I think it just as F1 fans, we're so used to that rhythm. It was very difficult for me to get to that. And you couldn't see that in testing, and you really couldn't tell until you got to where you were watching an exclusive onboard while you're also watching the onboard with timing. Observation 2, all the Mercedes customer teams, and this goes to Alpine, this goes to Williams, this goes to McLaren as well. They all looked like they were on the back foot, and they all looked like they were given a piece of equipment that they really didn't know how to use yet, because that's what happened. Because Mercedes didn't give their customer teams the actual working engine and all the working software that goes along with it, you really saw issues in practice. You saw Carlos Sainz's car just flat out died and couldn't explain why. Lando Norris's car in Q1, after when he made it, died, and he's like, I got no power. And they're like, oh, wait, 4 different setting changes. And then poof, the car comes back to life. I'm like, well, what the hell did they do? Did you hit it with a hammer and then it pops back on? So, I mean, it was very frustrating. It was really hard for a lot of those customer teams to get into a rhythm, and they were lacking, and you could clearly tell. Observation 3. Max Verstappen is a hell of a driver. Max Verstappen does not wreck like that. The fact that he got all that torque and it spun in the way that it is not something you are accustomed to seeing. It's not something you're accustomed to seeing with Oscar Piastri either. And we're going to talk about that when we flip to Sunday, because he had the very same thing, I think, happen to him. They look almost identical. That having been said, the teams that could optimize well did so, but I don't think anybody had 0.8 of a second from Merck in being how clear they were first in the first qualifying. And for all the hype and for all the wanting to get excited about it, I got to tell you, it's a gut punch. The first time you see that, you go, damn. You just kind of went like, well, good on you. Great engineering, good, fair play, Mercedes. I'm not saying that they didn't break any rules. I'm not suggesting that they did, but it just doesn't feel like qualifying should feel. And I also understand, 1, this is the first race, and 2, of the tracks on the calendar, this is where all that energy deployment stuff is probably magnified to be one of the top worst 3 tracks. They're like here, Spa, and Monza are where you're going to see it the most. So you definitely saw it the most, but still, it left me very much wanting more after qualifying for sure. All right, so we will flip over and we will try to get ourselves back together for the race. Unfortunately, there were a couple of drivers who get the dreaded DNS in our back markers before they even turned a lap. One was Nico Hulkenberg, who they could not figure out how to talk to the car. The car would not talk back to the laptops or anything that was plugged into it, and therefore it would not run. And that was the end of his day before it even started. The other one who made it out for a whopping 8 seconds, that would be Oscar Piastri, who I was listening to our friends down in Texas at Speed City who do a hell of a job. They were doing I was getting excited. I was tweeting about that the pit lane was open. And all of a sudden I hear Chris Medland on a live mic go, no, McLaren just crashed. And sure enough, it was Oscar Piastri, who had in a wreck that looks a lot like the Verstappen wreck, a lot like the Antonelli wreck from free practice 3. The car looked like it got just a run of torque that nobody thought Oscar wasn't anticipating, and the car just jumped out on him, and he spun around and hit the wall, and it was pretty much all you could say for that. Your other not classified finishers, Isaac Hadjar, who had an engine that just would not go anymore. He was on the radio to his team trying to tell him, I think this engine's not going to make it. They came back and said, we believe in the reliability of the engine, and Hadjar was then proven right. He did not make it. He only made it 10 laps. Valtteri Bottas in the Cadillac made it 5 more laps than he did, but he eventually did not finish as well, stopping at the end of the pit lane and causing a virtual safety car, but the Cadillac did not make it there. Aston Martins, yes, we were not expecting them to finish, but they went farther and they zombied themselves more than I think we all expected. Lance Stroll only makes it 15 laps. He is actually, he doesn't get a DNF. He gets the plus 15 laps to the end of the race after making it actually 2 lap 43. And Fernando Alonso DNFs after 21. circuits around the track. They definitely has admitted that they were using this race as a test session. So your first classified finisher, and this is an achievement in and of itself, given the complexity of the cars and the craziness of these regulations. Sergio Perez in the Cadillac finished the race. Yes, he's 3 laps down, but that's on debut, a really tough thing to do, and that should get called out. Good thing for Cadillac there. Carlos Sainz in the Williams. Williams had, I think, a weekend that they would like to forget, honestly. Their car seems to be very much overweight. A team that I thought was going to have some really good things coming out with these regs clearly hasn't gotten on top of them yet. Whether that's because they didn't get the latest spec of engine, I don't know, but I think they've got some other problems as well. But Carlos Sainz comes home P15, 2 laps down. Franco Colapinto, whose cat-like reflexes got him to the end of the race because I think it was Liam Lawson who didn't get off the line at all. And Franco Colapinto damn near T-boned him really early on, and jinks over, hits the wall himself, and kept going. So well done, Franco Colapinto, for getting off the line, for starting, but he isn't able to get into the points. Your first Racing Bull to finish is Liam Lawson. He only made it to P13. A nice little battle with Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez commenting that apparently Liam has a very long memory and doesn't forget anything because going back a couple years, and they were fighting each other too. So Liam Lawson and Sergio Perez, no love lost between the two of them. Lots of non-finishers. We kind of expected that, but big thoughts here in the back markers.
Yeah, we totally expected a lot of the cars to, in this beginning of the regulations, to have reliability issues or just be really far off the pace. And as we're going to get into here, only the top 6 drivers actually finished on the lead lap. So there's definitely a lot of pace difference between the top cars and those at the back. Really, really too bad for Oscar Piastri that he's just not getting any luck at his home Grand Prix, man. He's going out and getting stuck in the grass last year in a year where he could have been, really gunning for the championship, was really gunning for the championship. And then this year he doesn't even make it to the start. So feel really bad for him. I hope he can bounce back from that. I was really impressed with Isaac Hadjar in qualifying and at the beginning of the race. So it is really too bad that his engine blew up. And then I was sitting there on the edge of my seat wondering when Max's engine was going to blow up. Fortunately, that did not happen. So it was not all an awful weekend for Red Bull, but it was still pretty bad. And then, the Aston Martins, we had predicted abysmal lap numbers for them this weekend for our prop bet. That's how confident we were that they weren't going to be making it to the end of the race. And they did not. But they did bring in the cars and then put them back out for a little while just to collect that ever important data on trying to get the car running the right way. So bad weekend for them, but definitely a weekend for learning. And I guess it's good that Cadillac finished the race and all that stuff. But I mean, 3 laps down is pretty abysmal. And I'm sure figuring it out as they go and all that stuff, and they'll come back that much stronger next year. But still, it's pretty late.
Yeah, I mean, you see the mountain that they're not shying away from it, at least from everything that I've read. They realize the specter of what they've kind of gotten thrown into the deep end of the pool. You don't really know how to swim yet. So you kind of have to, literally, you're learning everything on the fly. It was a little concerning that of all the cars, it seemed to be the one that had all the parts falling off of it at certain points. The mirrors, you just decided to leave the car at certain points during the weekend. But, that'll get better, I think, as they get more laps and more of the routine under their belt. I'm not thrilled. As an American team, it's nice that they're there. It's a real car manufacturer that's behind it. We know that. But they got a long way to go, and I think they realized just how far they really do need to go. Yeah, I mean, what can you say about Oscar Piastri? It's just gutting from just me as a fan. Like, okay, we haven't even started the race, and you lose one. And just the way that he did it, and it wasn't like, I think McLaren had little gremlins in the car all weekend, and mostly it was on the Lando side. I actually thought up until that point, Piastri had a fairly straightforward and a fairly decent weekend. They were, I think, overall pretty competitive until the Mercedes decided to turn it all the way up and just prove how far clear they really were of everybody. And I thought Piastri, maybe under race pace might have shown well, might have finished maybe P5, P4, maybe an outside, not really an outside shot at the podium given where the Ferrari pace was, I think, at the end of the day. But I thought he was going to be the better of the two McLarens, and it was just very, very deflating. I think for the entire crowd, I think you saw the air go out of the venue. Very much like I remember there was a MotoGP race at Circuit of the Americas, and Marc Marquez crashed. Or no, it was Valentino Rossi who crashed, and half the people got up and actually started to leave in the middle of the race because that's what they were there for. So, when your home hero doesn't make it, it can be really deflating. And I think Rachel Fleming, who sent us a wonderful email that we will get to in a little bit, we were going back and forth over social media about it. And she's like, I never thought the Mark Webber curse could get transferred, but apparently it kind of did. And my response was, no, this curse has been broken, but in maybe 10, 15 years ago, we would have called that a Cubby occurrence because it was just a weird thing that would have happened when, everything is supposed to go right, yet something goes wrong. So I was just calling that a Weber occurrence because I can't explain it any other way than it was just something weird that happened. All right. So we will now dive into the midfield. P12, not a happy camper. I think came over the radio at one point and said, we really can't race like this. And that was Alex Albon in the Williams. P11, almost on the outskirts of the points and almost made it at the end, was Esteban Ocon in the Haas, but no such luck. P10 for a team that was really bad last year, even though they scored a lot of points last year. They were the worst team ever. Alpine gets off to a decent start. Pierre Gasly in the points, significant for them. Gabby Bortoleto, Audi on debut, get points as a works manufacturing team. That's very significant for them. P8 was Arvid Lindblad, a guy who's definitely got, I think, I liked your analysis of it, Cody. It's got some moves in him. A guy who I like to call Mini Max because I think he's got the exact same mindset, and I think Red Bull are definitely, if Hadjar doesn't work out, that's your next one. Just look out because they are very, very high on him. P7, the best of the rest from beyond the top four, turns out to be Oliver Behrman in the Haas. Respectable drive. I think they had some points of really good pace throughout the day, and I think Haas should leave Australia pretty happy with that. P6 recovering from P20 on the grid all the way up to P, tearing through some nice overtaking moves. Max Verstappen did put on a bit of a show if you were actually able to watch it, because he didn't have a whole lot of it on TV until he got up to Lando, which I thought was kind of disappointing there with the race direction. But P5, a bit of an up and down day. I think it ended more on a bit of more up because he was able to hold Max off, especially charging. He did not look like he had good tires late, but somehow managed to do it. Was Lando Norris in the McLaren. But you look at the gap, some seconds or 35 seconds up to the next car on the road is not where McLaren wants to be at this stage for sure. But that is P4, Lewis Hamilton, the first of the Ferrari finishers. It was Ferrari, Mercedes going at it, and Lewis comes out just kind of on the back end of that. Yet, I guess we can talk about Ferrari now, but we'll just go right into the podium. The podium was P3, Charles Leclerc, P2 was Kimi Antonelli, P1, George Russell. The Ferrari start thing is a thing. Yeah, we thought that maybe that was not a mirage of what they saw in testing, because they certainly got the jump on everybody early.
Yeah, you got Charles Leclerc rocketing up at the start from P4 to the lead, which was pretty amazing and kind of what we thought might happen based on all the practice starts that we've seen up to this point. The whole start procedure was maybe a little wacky anyway, because we had heard that they were going to have a pre-start period of 5 seconds to rev up the engines to build up that turbo pressure or whatever the hell they needed to do to make it so that they could actually get off the line before next week. And I don't know, maybe the pre-start, it seemed a little shorter than that to me, but whatever. I'm sure they're going to iron out the kinks on that. But the race start, it was 5 lights and out. Like I don't think I'd ever seen them go out quite that quickly. Caught me off guard, so I imagine had to catch some of the drivers off guard. Yeah, you got those Ferraris rocketing up. Lewis Hamilton had a really good start himself. It was pretty chaotic there right at the start. A lot of moving up and down just based on how you got off the line. Arvid Lindblad moved way up. Hadjar was still good, but yeah, the big thing there was Leclerc to the lead. And it kind of had me laughing my ass off because with how far in front Mercedes seemed to be after qualifying, it was kind of funny to watch Leclerc take the lead and then watch Russell struggle through the whole first stint to try to make an overtake on him stick. Which, if you want to talk about that part, how the overtaking has gotten kind of strange now too.
Yeah, it was not what you would expect. I mean, we've had the DRS for 10 plus years of drag reduction system where you get within a second, and that's when you can kind of expect the overtake to happen. You usually see it at the end of a straight. You would expect moves going into turn 1 here in Australia to be a good place to do it. You'd also expect maybe turn 5 or turn 9 and 10. Some high speed areas. The move like Oscar Piastri pulled on Hamilton on the outside in the rain last year was one of the better overtakes, I think, of the year. But it works dramatically differently now because what you end up with is you have a detection. There's still a detection point. And what you've got a few things going on. And you have to put this into, this is where it can kind of get confusing. And we're going to try to talk everybody kind of through this part of it because there's one detection point where if you are within a second, the car that is pursuing gets this, and the car that would be the defender also gets it. They get extra power from the battery pack. It's not necessarily a second battery, but it's extra power that they can tap into. It works a lot like the Formula E when they go into their extra deployment.
So is this the boost thing or the overtake thing?
This is the overtake mode. This is the overtake mode. So you get it for the lap, but both cars get it. And so it becomes, where do you want to deploy this extra power? And you also then are responsible as the driver for the amount of regen that you have to do in order to charge it back up throughout the lap. So if you burn it up in the first half of the lap, you're done. And I think what you saw in a lot of that first opening ding dong between Leclerc and Russell was trying to figure out, well, where should I deploy this? Because Leclerc would just swoop past like Russell wasn't even there. And you'd be, oh, well, that's the move done. But no, hang on. Later on in the lap, Russell would hit the button at a certain point that Leclerc wasn't hitting the button, or at least it's what we think, because we don't know because there really wasn't a graphic for it. This is a whole nother thing that we're going to have to get our arms around. And so you just see the swoop back and forth. The timing screen was actually pretty interesting to see, like, oh, okay, now this one's back in front. Now this one's back in front. So yeah, it's all in kind of how they are deploying. It's all the tools that they have at their disposal that I think once they can kind of tell the story a little bit better, and I think they kind of went into it without really being able to tell the story very well. It was very confusing because you wouldn't tell why. And you'd see like a gap of like 0.8 of a second go get zip gone, and the driver would overtake. And the only move that kind of looked like the traditional one was, I think, the final move that Russell pulled off on Leclerc going into turn 1. That at least looked like a legit traditional Formula One type move. George almost goes off the track, but manages to keep it in there and kept his foot in and got the move done. And that ended up being, I think, at the end of the day, the decisive move that ends up basically winning him the race. The Mercedes-Ferrari battle pretty much went on for the entirety of the race. Two things that happened that I was kind of surprised with, because we had a early virtual safety car, and instead of, usually that's the cue, like, well, hey, free pit stop, let's go take it. Ferrari didn't take it, but Mercedes did. And the other thing that Mercedes did really well, you got to hand it to them for this, is they made a set of hard tires last for like 40 some laps, which is not what Pirelli was necessarily recommending. So, and it apparently in the new rules, you can't get disqualified for tire weight anymore. So,
right. Yeah. They weigh the cars now without the tires.
Right. So, and then, but they get, right. Exactly. So it doesn't matter how much you wear them down. You can do the one stop. George was very, very vocal on wanting to do the one stop. They eventually did let him do that. And even though there was a second safety car or virtual safety car that happened later in the race, Ferrari did not take that opportunity to pit. They went the traditional one stop, and it just was not enough. They were on the better tire at the end, but they couldn't close the gap down. I think it was something like 15 seconds. They got it down to about 3 near the end, but no luck really for that. So you ended up the two Ferraris at the end, a couple seconds apart, the two Ferraris and the two Mercedes in their own little mini battles at the end. Ferrari did eventually, their pace won out despite all of the weird things with the start. Kimi Antonelli did not have a very good start. He was actually all the way back down to 7th or 8th. After his car basically did not go at the start. But you could see how much better the Mercedes were on pace, because even through the top 4, he was able to slice his way through the field relatively easily. And so that's pretty much your Australian GP. Cody, any other big thoughts here?
Despite the fact it wasn't quite as stark as qualifying in terms of the pace difference, it does still look like Mercedes has the best race pace as well. George Russell did still finish 15 and a half seconds out in front of Charles Leclerc. And, Kimi Antonelli was the only other car that was close to him. And guess what? He's got the same car. So based on qualifying, I would have expected it to be much, much higher, like maybe like 30 seconds, 40 seconds. It didn't get quite to that point, but we also don't know how hard Mercedes is actually pushing their car in the race. They might have just turned it way up for qualifying and then realized like, oh shit, maybe we don't need to do that. Turned back down for the race. But yeah, I would say after Ferrari didn't pit the cars during safety car or the virtual safety car, I think that was really what did in any chances they had of winning the race. They probably didn't have a great chance as it was, but that kind of seemed at that point like maybe they'd thrown in the towel a little bit, which was disappointing. Like I would have liked to have seen what the difference in time would have been at the end had they had at least one car on the same strategy. So we didn't get to see that happen. Or if they pit one car to get the better pace and then left the other one out there to try to like slow up the Mercedes, played that game. I feel like it could have got a little bit more interesting. And the race got a little stale after a sequence of stops, and Mercedes ended up running away with it. I was happy to see Max Verstappen make a really good recovery drive. I was not happy to see that he could not get past Lando Norris at the end, because he really seemed like he should have. He was on the harder compound of tire, but it was much younger tires. So the fact that he couldn't get the move done on Lando was disappointing for me, but fun racing between the two of them. It was fun to watch. Yeah, Arvid Ledblad, he was really fun to watch on track. He raced hard. He defended hard. It didn't matter who he was racing against, because he did it to Max Verstappen at one point before a virtual safety car came out. Raced him pretty hard, but I think he was pretty fair on it. So definitely excited to see how he's going to do going forward. But yes, my feelings overall after the race were not quite as sour as after qualifying. But like I said with my headline, more data required. This was a track, like you said, where energy recovery is hard. And there's going to be, I'm sure, plenty of tracks during the year here where they're going to have much better ways of recovering energy. And you're not going to see this whole lift and coast thing happening. And the drivers will be able to really push throughout the entire lap. And I really look forward to that. But there's also still a lot of tracks on the calendar where these cars just are straight up not going to work well. Like, didn't work well here. It's not going to work well at Spa. It's not going to work well at Monza. It's probably not going to work well at Saudi Arabia or Japan or China. So you're up to like, a quarter of your races here where these guys are going to have to do weird lift coast stuff. They're not going to be able to push the car all the way around the lap. And that really kind of blows that you're going to be seeing that much. So I really hope they figure something out to make this energy recovery system work a little more efficiently.
Yes, a software patch, I think, is required across, I think, the deployment. And one way that I think it'll get better is just seeing some of the other teams, especially I think the Mercedes customer teams, get more on the program, because they now have the right version of the engine. And get on top of that. I think that
was a little bit of a dick move by Mercedes to do that.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, like when the headline first came out, I think a lot of the fandom reacted to, they're going to get the more power. Well, they might have gotten more power, but they didn't know what to do with it. And that's really what you saw. And then you just do have these times where the engine just does something weird and nobody can seem to explain it. And there was one part of practice, I think it was FP2, where Lando's like, I got no power. I got to come in. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's okay. We got to cool the ERS. And I'm like, he's been out for 3 laps. How can the ERS already be overcooked? And he wasn't even pushing on any of the 3 laps. So what the hell was going on? So yeah, there's a lot to be a little confused about. I am buoyed by the fact that I thought they raced better than they qualified. That was for sure. It looked a little like by the time we got near the end of the race, I think everybody kind of learned where the trick spots were, so that the laps themselves looked smoother. But it was definitely chaos early. And I think it was chaos early because I think everybody really didn't know what to do. And you had guys pushing buttons and cars doing stuff. Yeah, I mean, my three race observations were chaos early, but was that a factor because people were not optimized yet? For a decision desk in pure form, why are you not listening to Lewis Hamilton when he's like, hey, we got to pit at least one of us here. I think Lewis knows how to read a race pretty good. You might want to listen to him. Just saying. But maybe they felt just lucky to be there. I mean, given where they were qualified and given the crazy start they got, maybe they thought that this was the best they were going to be able to do, and they were just kind of happy with it. And that it's a long season, and as we've seen before, every point matters. So you bank what you can get and you move on. And I was encouraged that Max Verstappen was able to kind of cut through the field. It would have been nice to have seen some of that. I'm still looking for it on the main feed because I didn't really see him until he got to P6. So, and there wasn't even a whole lot of talk about it either. It was the Mercedes Ferrari show and not a whole lot else. It seemed.
I mean, to be fair, the Mercedes Ferrari show was going on
the
like
first
40,
time
50 seconds up the road. So
right.
It was the hot topic.
No, I get it to a certain extent, but I would have liked to have seen the recovery drive from Max. I would have loved to have seen some of those moves. I think he probably gave a better show than we're giving him credit for. But yeah, I'm not getting off of the Formula One train by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a little deflated given kind of where some of the gaps are, but this was level 0. We kind of knew this was going to be level 0, and we can go from here. Certain things that I think they're already trying to do. One, there's stories that are already out there I read today that they're going to have graphics that are going to talk a little bit more about the battery deployment and the boost modes available. They tried to come up with something in the middle of the race, and it really didn't explain much. But at least you know that they're aware that they have to tell the story better. One thing that I will say I thought was a positive on the weekend, and I'd been very leery of the move in the United States to Apple TV, and I haven't seen any of the ratings numbers yet, and that'll come out probably later on in the week, because streaming numbers are always weird in general too. But I was impressed that for the most part, a lot of the Apple TV stuff worked. It worked on time. I was able to watch this. I'm a Sky guy. I've always been a Sky guy since I first realized that coverage was out there. And so that's kind of where I stuck to. I didn't really stick to the main feed, but I will say HDR 10 plus Formula One on my large television. Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, there were some ads, not necessarily in the sessions, but like next to the sessions, which, okay, that's fine. There are times when you can put that in. That's not the end of the world, but the race itself was commercial free. And I thought it worked pretty well. And like to the point where like I didn't have to have my backup stream ready to go. I had it ready to go in case I needed it, but I didn't end up needing it. So it worked very, very well. And I think Apple TV had a good debut, and they'll only continue to get better. So there's positives to take from. I mean, the nice thing is like if you had a bad weekend, if you're Oscar Piastri, the best thing is 3 days from now, you get to get back in the race car and you can try to put, what happened here behind you. But we'll see. It's a sprint weekend coming up, so not a whole lot of opportunity for learning. So we'll see. But it's sprint more racing.
And 1 week away.
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyway, that's kind of going to do it for the Australian GP. We'll take our first official break. We will tell you where the driver standings are and where the constructor standings are after round 1 of the season. We'll then open it up. We've got our contributors in the fan email segment. We'll hand out some awards. I'll get to do a little bit more ranting. Cody will do some ranting too. We'll talk about predictions. Believe it or not, they weren't as bad as we thought they were going to be. In some respects, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then we'll try to get you all set up for China. So come on back. You won't want to miss it. You are listening to the Outlap F1 podcast, and we'll be right back after this quick pit stop. Grab your flu powder, broomstick, or apparate to your favorite audio streaming service to join the discussion on Hogwarts, a podcast, where Dan and his friends have in-depth chapter-by-chapter breakdowns of each Harry Potter novel. Join the group as they dive into the magical world and discuss plot points, analyze character development, and occasionally go off the rails. Whether you're a muggle who's new to the series or a pure-blood wizard who won't need a remember-all, Hogwarts, a podcast, brings everyone to the Great Hall for a magical discussion. Hogwarts, a podcast. Available wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, welcome back on in. This is season 8. This is episode number 2 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2026 Australian GP race review show, our first one of the season. We are up and running. The F1 season is here. You've got Andy. I'm along with Cody tonight, and we just wrapped up talking about, I think our verdict on this race is up and down. I think there's things we can say that might look cool. There's things that kind of annoyed us. Yeah, I think we're just kind of here at this point of the show.
One thing while you're talking about things looking cool is I will say that the cars themselves look really, really cool. I love the kind of interesting front wings. I like that they're a little smaller and snappier. Like it's really fun watching them go around the track because they are a little more agile because they're smaller and lighter, and so you kind of see the drivers kind of snapping through the turns a little bit more and a lot more able to recover when the cars get a little loose of grip. So it's really fun to watch them. I just want them to iron out all the problems with that ERS system.
Yeah, and like I said, and then we were saying before, right before we got to the break, this I know was level 0. Like, your development curve is going to be very vertical. There's going to be updates that are going to come. There's definitely going to be developments. They're going to get on top of it. I bet you by the time we get to the end of the season and the last races, it's going to look and feel a lot different. We're going to know, maybe we don't know what the final pecking order is going to be at the end of the day, because someone could come up with an engineering, solution or a different way of deploying that's different. And suddenly, a rocket ship appears from nowhere. So it wasn't, and all things, even though we had a lot of reliability, it wasn't as bad as 2014. 2014, I remember we had cars petering out before we got to the grid. I think 12 cars finished that race. Yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. So this was not that. We're not to that. Yeah, Mercedes are out in front right now. And if you're a Mercedes fan, enjoy the moment because, hey, you guys earned it. You did go through could clearly tell every interview, Toto Wolff did not like the last of the regulations. Toto Wolff was nothing but happy to see them go away. So, hey, look, fair play. Like, I gotta say, that's good Formula One-ing on their part. To maximize the rules to the extent that you can and and build up as big of an advantage as you can. And it's on the rest of the teams now to step up and take that away from them. So that's kind of where I'm at the end of this week. But we do have driver standings. We do have constructor standings. So, Cody, we'll keep it the way we always have. You take care of the drivers. I'll handle the teams.
All right. So our driver standings following the Australian Grand Prix first race of the year. It's going to follow your top 10 finishing drivers. So we got George Russell out in front at 25 points for Mercedes. Kimi Antonelli, his teammate, second place at 18 points in the other Mercedes. Expected to hear those two at the top a lot this year. But Ferrari also still looks promising. They're definitely kind of in their own island behind Mercedes at the moment, but also pretty far ahead of everybody else, it seems. So you got Charles Leclerc in third for Ferrari at 15 points. Lewis Hamilton in fourth, also for Ferrari at 12 points. Lando Norris finishing quite a ways off of those top four, unfortunately, but at least McLaren got a driver that finished decently and got some points on the board. Lando Norris, fifth for McLaren at 10 points. Max Verstappen had a pretty awesome recovery drive. He finished in sixth for Red Bull at 8 points. Oliver Behrman. This one was a big surprise for me because we went into testing being like, wow, Haas is really like on top of this. And we went into practice and qualifying, and we're kind of wondering if maybe that wasn't the case. But Oliver Behrman finishing best of the rest outside of those top four we expected to be up there. So he's in seventh place for Haas, gets 6 points. Arvid Lindblad had a fantastic day himself, points on his Formula One debut, well earned. Arvid Lindblad, eighth place, Racing Bulls, that's 4 points. Gabriel Bortoleto also had a really great debut outing for Audi, manages to get points for them on their debut. So Gabby Bortoleto, a ninth place, earns him 2 points. And then Pierre Gasly wrapping up the top 10. Alpine is maybe not as on it as we had hoped they would be with that Mercedes engine, but we could see that changing. And hey, they actually got a point their first time out, which is, I think, more than you could say about last year. I think their prospects are better for this season.
Yeah, Flavio doesn't have to fire anybody on the first week this time, which I think is refreshing. But the constructors, again, with one race, it's pretty cut and dry. Mercedes have maximized the weekend, a 1-2 finish for them. See them top of the board with 43 points. P2 is Ferrari with 3 and 4. They come in with 27 points. P3 is McLaren on the strength of Lando Norris's P5 finish to acquire 10 points. P4 is Red Bull on the strength of Max Verstappen. And you want to say, well, things might still be the same. I don't think so. I think they've got something in Hadjar. It was definitely a different vibe to the weekend, and good on Red Bull for getting 2 drivers up to speed here. But they check in with 8 points. P5 is Haas. Can they secure a P5 spot over the course of the season? They're the early favorite, at least right now, because I think they were definitely best of the rest here. So they check in with 6 points. P6 is Racing Bulls. They have 4 points. P7 is Audi. Huge achievements to get them some points on debut. P8 is Alpine. 1 point for them on the strength of Pierre Gasly's P10. P9 is Williams with 0. P10 is Cadillac, and I have to make a P11 on my chart here, but I know who's there. That is Aston Martin. P11, Aston Martin. So Williams, Cadillac, Aston Martin, 9, 10, 11, respectively, all on 0 points. All right. Well, you've heard our takes on kind of our up and down takes on this weekend. What were your thoughts, fans out there? We've got our contributors here. Cody, it's your time to shine. Rachel Fleming was right on it, right at the end of the race. She got up at 3:30 something in the morning UK time. She was an absolute trooper and caught pre-race stuff, which I thought was amazing. So we've got some dedicated fans out there. So Cody, what do they got to say?
Yeah, no kidding. That is some diehard fandom there. I'm not even sure I would be getting up at 3:30 in the morning, and I do a podcast with you. So, yes, our first fan email comes in from Rachel Fleming. Thank you, Rachel. And she says, F1 is so back. George wins. One of my favorite drivers, starts with a brilliant win. I really enjoyed it. Worth getting up for. A really good race, and I felt it shut up some doomsayers who said F1 is ruined. Ferrari really should have pitted under the first virtual safety car. I agree. But I doubt they could have beaten Mercedes today. I also agree. It would have been tighter. Yeah, we're all on the same page at this point. Hammy continues his I hate the pit wall radios. During winter break, I watched the 05 back, and barring hearing the words Kimmy's gone again, I recall seeing teams bring cars back out for getting a better quality position. I know it's completely different circumstances, but seeing Aston Martin bring back Alonso and Stroll back out brought it all back. Yeah, and you picked, from my understanding, a pretty good season to watch, start to finish. I think the 05 one was probably pretty cool between Alonso and Raikkonen. Alonso watch, poor sod, enough said. Perez watch, which is now back on the menu. I got to the finish, which is a good result, and the fight with Lawson was fun to see. And replacing Sauber watch is Audi watch. Nico didn't start, which is a real shame, but Gabriel got to the finish with a brand new engine and got points. Finally, if it's Ferrari versus Mercedes, we are looking at a great season. A lot of good things said there. Yes, I'm definitely not on the F1 is ruined train. I'm definitely on the F1 needs improvement train. I think there is potential here. And to me, the really big issue is that there's not enough electrical power to make it all the way around for a lap at a lot of these tracks. I don't know who did the math on this and decided these are your battery capacities, these are your recharge rates, these are your deployment rates. I think whoever did the math on that was a little off because, I mean, yeah, a little extra battery storage and a little extra, deployment means you're going to need better, heavier regeneration components and stuff like that. But you're already saving a pretty good amount of weight. Would it really added that much back to the weight if you just made sure these cars had enough electric juice to actually get around all the tracks all the time? I feel like we wouldn't be having this issue. Something that I read about a long time ago is that the recovery components on the F1 cars, they're only on 2 of the wheels. Yeah, and I think in the endurance racing, they're on all 4 wheels. Yeah, that might have made it a little heavier. It also would have really helped with your recovery problems. So yes, not ruined, has a lot of potential, needs improvement is my feeling on that.
Yeah, I'm in a lot of the same camp. I was, like I said before, I was very, very down after qualifying when you just kind of see the extent of what I'm just going to call, I think, some Mercedes skullduggery, but it was legal skullduggery, and you got to hand it to them. And okay, they earned being the rabbit to go out in the first few races because they did it. It was within the rules. It's what everybody sat down and agreed to, and you let them do it. And they did it. So congrats to them. And you got to say that. That having been said, I do think you'll see some shoring up just in the efficiency of the cars as they get their arms around them. And I do think the show, therefore, will get better. You understood why they tried to do as much testing as they did, but when you don't give everybody the same spec of everything, how can you test what you don't have? So therefore, you kind of look like you're on the back foot. And that's kind of what they engineered there. And so that's kind of what was frustrating me a little bit. But that having been said, on Sunday, I was definitely a lot more higher on the overall prospect of it. Still got to get some cars to nail down some of these starts. I think there is a intrinsic safety issue there. The almost Liam Lawson not making the first corner could have been a problem because his car didn't move. And Franco Calapinto, at least he's got reflexes. I can't say a whole lot else for his driving sometimes, but he's got good reflexes. And that was really important because
that was a window like that he had to squeeze through. And he did it.
And the fact that he banged it off the wall and the car kept going was, it could have been a whole lot worse in a whole lot of different ways. I am happy that at least if it's Mercedes versus Ferrari, that at least Mercedes have a foil, if not yet an opponent. In kind of my scale there, they have someone who will keep them honest, which is important because otherwise you're going to see 20, 30-second gaps. I mean, we may still see a couple of those at certain places, and that to me is okay, but that just can't be every weekend because then it gets annoying.
You're going to have a lot of George Russell looking in his mirror at the beginning of the race where Leclerc is behind him and he's just going to have that little bead of sweat going like, God damn it, he's right there. He's just going to rock it.
And you wonder if the starts are going to be a real thing because I don't know how Mercedes fixed that. I mean, Kimi Antonelli looked like he had nothing. And then Russell had wheel spin and it just didn't sound like a very good start. So that may be opportunities for some cars to get up and move through the field. But it's still going to come down to strategy, execution. I think at the end of the day, when you get into the racing and just where you are overall pace. I'm still fascinated to see what the upgrades bring, but I know the first rounds are going to be kind of this because you can't really bring updates because your races are so far away. And it may end up being for the overall health of the show that if we do end up losing Saudi Arabia and Bahrain from the calendar this year, that may be the reset that some of these teams actually end up needing to get their arms around some of this stuff. So you may get a mini spring break where you can get, especially for like Aston Martin, because every extra day they can get is probably a blessing for them. So yeah, I'm thereabouts. Not, like I said, I will still get up for China. No worries there. I will still get excited at the beginning of a weekend, but I do think they have some things that they're going to address. Now, the other thing that I've been saying is we've been leading into these regulations. I do think Ben Sulayem has the working television. I think Stefano Domenicali, even though sometimes he doesn't act like it, does have a working television. The fact that there were so many high names in the sport that were being openly critical over the course of the weekend will get heard, even though Domenicali comes out and says, well, we shouldn't do that. Yes, you should. If it's bad, you can call it bad. And I do think that they will pivot and there will be things, like I said, I do think you'll see some software patches coming through the course of this season and definitely in the next season to try to make this a better show across the board.
Now something on here before we move on to the next one. I feel like, Rachel, your Alonso watch might have to turn into retirement watch at some point with how bad the Aston Martin car is right now. I don't think Alonso's going to want to deal with it for very long. In fact, I have a prediction that at the end of this season, you're going to see Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, and Max Verstappen all retire from the sport. It's going to be a stretch to see if that comes through, but I do think that there is a serious possibility of that happening. So yeah, you might have to add retirement watch to your list based on how well those three drivers are doing.
I mean, that would be a major blow. I think the fact that Hamilton got back through the field where he was, probably he was a lot better. But there was a tweet from one of the media guys who was there, Nate Saunders, who, even though ESPN isn't covering Formula One and on live broadcasts anymore, they still have a section of their website that's dedicated to it. And I actually appreciate the fact that they still allow Nate to fly and cover the sport, because usually ESPN just chucks you in the bin when you're not on their network anymore. And he said he couldn't believe the driver pen that he was observing Saturday after qualifying. They're like, nobody's happy.
No,
other than Mercedes. Right. Like nobody was happy. And you've got the last 10 years of driver world champions in Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, and Lando Norris all saying this was not the right direction. So that will carry weight. It definitely carried a lot of weight even into Sunday. So yeah, like I'm still willing to give it an incomplete, but it wasn't the grand thing that we're used to seeing for sure. So there's definitely things that need to get ironed out.
Thank you again, Rachel, for your email. Our next one comes in from Dave Doherty. Thank you, Dave. And he says, hi, team. Were you impressed with the racing regs for this year? And Mercedes looked good in quality, but the race pace was okay. How did you see it? As we said before here, not super impressed with the way the regs are at the moment. I was definitely a lot more hopeful after testing. Now actually seeing this in a competitive weekend, I definitely see that a lot of the concerns going into these regs were well-founded. So I guess that's how I feel about that. Definitely room for improvement. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think all of the teams will get more on top of these cars and things like energy deployment and all that as time goes on, like Andy was saying, and it'll get better. As far as the quality versus race pace, I really think that Mercedes probably has race pace to spare. I think they probably are trying to just look after the car, look after the components, and not get so far out in front during the race that everyone is like, we need to do something. They're kind of playing that game now of like, we're not that far out in front. Like, you don't really need to change the rules to make it closer. So, they turned it up in quali, and they showed how much pace they have. And yeah, I think if anyone starts making it more competitive, they're just going to turn that race pace back up. And I really think that they have a good chance of locking down most of the races this year.
Yeah, especially if they can get to clean air. Because even, I think the telling part was when Ferrari didn't make the pit stop and Mercedes did, they were something in the area of like 18 seconds or something down. And you just watch the laps on the timing and you go, this is 3/4 or half to 3/4 of a second a lap. And that was probably where they were and they had a nice gap, but you saw that thing come down, and before you knew it, it was like 7 seconds. And then the other virtual safety car just happened to hit. And because of that, you just went, ooh. And the other telling part was, yeah, Antonelli had a bad start, but he crisscrossed and cut his way through the field and made a lot of competitive cars look pretty pedestrian as he was doing so. So I do think Mercedes have it in race pace. They definitely have it in tire management. I think that's definitely a given. Also, now it's going to be tough to see, like when it gets hot, does that still play? We do know that intrinsically Mercedes cars have always been better when it's been cool, and this was a cooler weekend temperature-wise. So, maybe that's was a factor too, but they definitely look to be the standard. Going to be the standard for the first flyaway races for sure. Yeah, until we kind of get some more definition on what this calendar is actually going to look like because of what's going on in the world. We don't really know, but maybe that's a reset that helps some teams, brings them back a little bit. But I do think that I think you're right when you say that they probably have some pace in hand. It's pretty scary concept at the minute. But the best thing you can do if you're one of those other teams is nail the start, keep them in dirty air for as long as humanly possible, and try to keep them honest. That's how you beat a team like that.
And pray for equipment failures.
Yep, that's true.
Thank you again, Dave, for your email. Our last one comes in from The Formula. Thank you, Mr. Formula. And he says, I'm confused about overtake mode. Is that an entirely separate battery that just sits there charged, waiting to be deployed until the drivers are within 1 second of the car ahead? Does it recharge at the same time as the primary system? This is stupid, honestly. I don't like how complicated this is. V8s now. Yes, it is confusing. No, so far as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong here, so far as I understand it, it is all the same battery system. It's all one battery system. It's just the limitations on how much energy can be deployed by the battery at any given time. So the batteries have limits on how much energy, like the recovery system has a limit on how much energy can be recovered. I think it goes between 250 and 350 kilowatts. I don't really know what that equates to by some real world understandable metric, but that's the numbers that are on the board. And they have limits on how much energy they can deploy from the battery. What the overtake mode does is essentially says, okay, now instead of being able to put out this many kilowatts of energy from your electrical system, when you push the button, you get this much. It's, I forget. I don't really know how much more.
I want to say I think it's an extra 50 to 100
kilowatts.
Yeah.
Something like that. So
it's meant to be a factor, but it's not meant to be the factor.
So you're getting that extra power but that extra power is coming from the same battery. It's been there all along. It's just the regulations are in play to make it as like a pass aid. So it's just, you're pretty much telling your battery system it's okay to put this much more out. Now, what comes along with that is if you use it that way, you're draining your battery a lot faster and you're pretty much only getting still the same recovery, I think, but when you're braking and stuff. So yeah, that you can't, there's not really a whole lot you can do about how much energy you're recovering. So there is a greater likelihood, if you're not careful, of draining your battery and ending up in positions that we saw George Russell getting into during the race, where he would use the overtake mode. He'd get out in front of Charles, but then he wouldn't have any juice left. So the next lap in the same spot, Charles would just fly on by him because he had more energy to deploy. I definitely agree that it is complicated right now. I still don't even understand the boost thing versus overtake. So I guess it's like the car is, it's always, the electrical powertrain is always outputting energy in combination with the ICU. That's always happening. So there's always electrical energy being deployed. I guess, again, correct me if I'm wrong, the boost mode is you can just say, I need extra electrical power at certain points on the track and you can get it, or wherever on the track you can do it. It's like a mini overtake. Overtake mode is even more powerful, but yes, only occurs if you are within 1 second of the car in front of you at the single detection point on the track. And is it both drivers, the driver in front and the driver behind, get that overtake? Yep. So they both get that electrical deployment, and then it's up to them where they use it to figure out if an overtake's actually going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the best real world example that I can give you at this point that I've seen about how all this kind of plays was the Lando Max battle kind of at the end. Because when Max got to it in a second, I hear Lando's engineer come on and say, okay, you're both going to have boost available. We think the best places to deploy are turn here, 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 and here. And based on where your cars have relative pace, where you need to hold off Max the most was turn 14, because that was where the relative pace of the two cars had the differential. Now, that's going to be on the driver to, one, execute that, and two, figure out if that's really correct or not, because the engineer is just he's taking a guess. He's taking an educated guess based on data. He doesn't know for sure that that's going to work. And you also don't know what Max is going to do, because Max is probably getting stuff from GP on a whole different, like, gap to Lando here, 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 and here. And so it's the counterplay. So it's one battery, but it's two buttons. The normal ERS deploy is managed by the computer. The boost comes in when you as the driver are overriding the deployment map that the computer already has, because they think they know what the most efficient way is. That's where the computer is doing it and your driver's not really inputting it. The boost comes in to say, well, we can deploy more here, but then the computer then has to figure out where the lack of it is later on down in the lap. The overtake is specifically when cars are within a second of each other. And like in Australia, it was right before the main straight, the detection point, that little chicane, that was where the line was. And then both cars would get it, the attacking car and the defending car. So that's kind of why you see, like, you would see a lot of potential overtakes where the car would get close and maybe even get alongside, and then the other car would just kind of defend that move off a little bit, because the attacking driver is probably doing it going into the corner and the defending driver is trying to do the deployment coming out of the corner. Is it an easy story to tell on television? No, it is not. Does it make for some very confusing looks, even on the timing? Because here's the other thing that you always used to know. You used to kind of figure when that little icon, like when a car would be chasing another car on the F1 timing screen, it would turn green, like the gap would turn green. You saw a lot of green gaps because of where the cars were deploying, and you saw a lot of differential in lap times because of that. And it didn't necessarily mean they're like, okay, well, for sure that's going to lead to an overtake in the next corner. No, it didn't. It's like, well, that should lead. No, didn't happen there. And so unless it was a car overtaking a car in another one of the groups, and I would say that you've got your Mercedes, Ferrari, you've got your Red Bull, McLaren, you got your midfield, and you got your back markers right now. And unless you were overtaking in a different group, but if you were trying to overtake in your same group, I think it got a little tough. Other than maybe early on with the Mercedes Ferrari ones, because I think they were still trying to learn how to deploy. But later on, as the race settled in and everybody kind of got more used to it, I think you kind of saw it wasn't as easy to pull off moves, or the gaps actually were too much to where you really couldn't see it as much.
I
But yeah,
agree.
we've got some work to do to make this easier.
Yes, definitely. As far as the V8s go, who knows what's going to happen, man? It could be that, they find out that they reach a certain point where the engineering has all been sorted out and peaked, and we might still have some of these problems. They might be completely gone. I would think if most of these issues with the energy recovery are ironed out, that you could see these regs stick around for a while. If we get to the peak of the engineering here and we're still coming back to Australia every season and seeing the lifting coast, I think we might be heading towards some newer simplified regs sooner. I would think it would be great if you took this chassis and you put a V8 in it and you took out most of the battery system. I think it would be really great if you went back to what we had a while ago, where you had V8s with a very small amount of deployable electrical energy that you could use for a little bit of a boost. And honestly, go back to contemporary DRS. The whole active aero thing really is only here to make it so that you don't have even bigger issues with running out of electrical energy during a lap. It's really kind of a Band-Aid for that. So you can get rid of that as
we didn't even cover this. There were about to, before FP3, FIA wanted to take one of the straight modes out, and 11 teams came storming down into the race director's office and said, "You cannot do that. We can't finish the damn lap if you don't let us do that." And an hour before FP3, they switched it back around and said, "Now you can have your straight mode back." They literally put the bollards back out there after they were going to take them away. So yeah, I mean, like I said, this clear to me, this was level 0. Let's see what it looks like in a few rounds when those who, and I think it's the challenge of people like us who are doing shows like this to try to explain it, to try to understand it ourselves is not an easy thing. And it's going to be incumbent on your presenters. The best thing that I can say about the fans having a voice is express. If you're frustrated with this, express that. That's okay. Do it constructively. Do it. Don't bring me back to 2000, Formula One with 25-second gaps and 2 overtakes, but bring me somewhere to where, like, okay, what actually makes sense to try to fix it from here? Because I do think the cars needed to lose some weight, and I do think the cars needed to get not as wide, and that was definitely a problem. But I don't know that doing this 50-50 split was necessarily the way to go when we weren't sure how we were going to get there. But we're down the road. And I do think, as I've said before, if it really sucks and it starts hurting the pocketbook of these teams and FOM and all the other stuff, they will change it because they will do it as in their own best interests. Mm-hmm. So you do have some help as a fan there.
Agreed.
All right.
Thank you guys again for your emails. It was really great hearing from you guys, and we look forward to seeing more.
Yes. Like I said, we are going to stay on top of this. We'll see how it evolves throughout the course of these early races here for sure. All right. So it is now time for our awards. We will start with, what did we want to throw in the bin? We threw a lot in the bin already. Are we throwing more in the bin? Cody, what you got?
My rubbish award is going to go to the battery and electric recovery system, because I think it is coming into play, at least at these types of tracks, too much. It seems like your best pace around at the lap really right now at a track like this depends on how well you can manage that electrical deployment, how well you can recover it. Can you make it last around an entire lap? It's when it comes to the overtaking, I think it's actually kind of interesting, because then it's kind of like, okay, who's going to deploy their energy where to get that extra boost? Qualifying, it's not fun. I don't like it. It used to be way more fun to watch, like, the driver gun it into a turn as fast as they could, or, like, wait until the very last minute to slam on the brakes. And you don't really have that driving on the absolute edge at the moment. And this electrical system is the main culprit.
All right. So Cody's chucking that one into the bin. My rubbish award is just really simple. And I think this is where a lot of, the frustration comes from, is we don't like being confused all the time. We like to kind of understand what we're supposed to be looking at in Formula One. And look, we had 3 rounds of tests, and I listened to a lot of commentary I read a lot of stuff, and I get to the first weekend, and there were still lots of opportunities where I was very confused as to what I was supposed to be watching. Was this an out lap, a warm up lap, a push lap, a cool down lap, a recharge lap? What the hell was going on? Like, did he screw up? Did one of my drivers screw up the qualifying lap and then they have to go around again? Okay, that's one type of reaction. Or did the car just not work? Or did he just slow down for some reason? Or why the hell did Carlos Sainz just stop at the end of the pit lane? Because I don't know. And then it seemed forever for them to clear that. They ended up throwing a virtual safety car, which okay, that's fine. But then they went to a full red flag, and then everybody's qualifying simulations got screwed up. Like, it was just very tough to get into a rhythm, very hard to follow. And I like to think I know what's going on, but I was confused more often than not. And that, to me, is, I think, the biggest problem is we got to get the understanding of what this is out there graphically in a way. We have to be able to communicate it better. I think that will aid in some of the frustration where you go, George Russell overtook Charles Leclerc because he had 40% more left in his battery and hit the boost button and hit the overtake button, and Leclerc had nothing because he did the move on the previous lap. Okay, at least now I know what I'm looking at, and I understood it. Otherwise, it looks like Charles Leclerc is standing still, and why the hell did you just let that guy just go around you like you weren't even standing there? It was for the lead of the damn race. Mm-hmm. There may be perfectly good reasons for that, but you don't see that unless you know what's going to happen. So there's a big communication problem that FOM has to do. It's to me, I think the biggest way, if these regs are going to be successful, and this was not necessarily the best debut of them, the communication's got to get better. Enough said.
Agreed.
All right. We'll move on to our analysis paralysis. I think we have consensus here. I'll go first with this one. The Ferrari decision desk. Mid-season form. You might want to listen to your 7-time world champion who's saying you might want to pit one of us. Might make sense. Could have split the strategy, maybe put Mercedes under a little bit more pressure, but you didn't. And if there was a chance at a win, it definitely went away once you made that.
Yes, I am in agreement. And my analysis paralysis also goes to Ferrari. They had the chance to make me laugh my ass off with a Charles Leclerc victory after how far in front George Russell was after qualifying. I mean, I guess we don't know for sure if it would have happened, but the way that they ran their strategy, it definitely wasn't going to happen. And so I am a little upset that they wasted that opportunity.
I feel you there. All right, dark horse of the day. I'm going to be at least a U.S. homer, and I'm going to give it to Haas, who I think have come out and have just a really nice, solid car. Ferrari power unit, they're making it work. Ollie Behrman having a pretty darn good opening weekend to the season, if I say so myself. Clearly the best of the rest, good pace. Held up Lando Norris a couple times in the middle part of that race too, which I thought was very strong for him to do. So my dark horse goes to Ollie Behrman in the Haas team. Cody, what you got?
Good choice. I'm actually going to award 2 dark horses this time. The first one's going to go to Gabriel Bortoleto, because I really did not think Audi, with their new power unit and all that, I really didn't think that they were going to be in the points on debut. Bortoleto made that happen, so good on him. And then my other one is Arvid Lundblad. You know, it's first time in Formula One. I thought he'd be doing a lot more learning, but no, he was racing hard, racing rough. He got points where his teammate, who has a couple seasons of experience at this point, did not. So yeah, I thought that was a really good, unexpected performance.
Yeah, I think that those are all good candidates there. All right, driver of the day. I give it to George Russell because he won and was clearly the best, but I also put in parentheses, Mercedes were the drivers of the day, just simply because, look, they got on top of these regs quicker than anybody else did. It's clear there. And there's a lot of stepping up that needs to be done for the rest of the pack. And George Russell's the benefactor of it, but he did everything he needed to do. I can't really say that he put a foot wrong all weekend. So driver of the day, George Russell and the Mercedes team. Cody, what you got?
Mine is going to go to Charles Leclerc, because he managed to make the race on Sunday interesting, significantly so in the first half. And I really didn't think that was going to be possible after watching what happened on Saturday. So thank you, Charles Leclerc, for making my night fun for the first half of the race.
All right. Well, that'll conclude our awards, opening ones for the season there. All right. So we'll move into predictions. And believe it or not, we weren't as bad as we thought we were going to be. It was kind of a darts and a dartboard type of thing. Now, the one thing I will say, our lap times, at least the qualifying lap time, were over a second off. So we were probably giving these engines a bit more credit than they were necessarily due. That having been said, though, Cody, you finished with 4 points on the weekend. You got the quali lap time. Because you were slower than me. So you got that there. You got P3 on the podium with Leclerc. Good pick there. You got the fastest lap driver. Max Verstappen did have the fastest lap, even though you don't.
Yeah, I got 1 for 3.
Yep. And you did get the prop bet because Aston Martin came back out and got more lap count. So they got it there. Did one better on this weekend. I got 5 points. I got the pole sitter because I nailed George Russell there. I got P1 on the podium with Russell and P3 on the podium with Leclerc. My P2 Piastri pick that kind of fizzled out on the formation laps there. The fastest lap time I got is actually pretty close to it, to P2.0. Not that far off. We were in the same 10th, so I was impressed that I was able to do that there. Fastest, we said P3 podium fastest lap time, and then I got the bonus pick. I got Lando Norris in P5. Just had a feeling that was kind of where he was going to finish, and my feeling turned out to be right there. So I get the early 1-0 lead on this, but it's a long season. We got lots of races to go. Plenty of times for me to look really dumb. All right. So that kind of concludes the Australian GP. We go again. No rest for the weary. We pack up. We go again. China and a sprint weekend. So the tests, they are coming. We're going to see a lot of racing action over the course of the next weekend with the Chinese Grand Prix. We will try to be back with a preview Wednesday, Thursday-ish, if we can do that. And then we'll try to be back with a race review because it'll be another early morning. I think for us, I think this is a 1-2 in the morning race time for us. I think it's going to be pretty brutal, but we'll take a look at the calendar when we get there. But anyway, Cody, any final thoughts?
Just that we are off to a little bit of a controversial start, but if you are frustrated over what you saw, don't worry. There's a lot of races. There's a lot of crazy shit that could happen. And fortunately, there are catch-up policies in the rules for the engines especially, but these guys are going to be developing their cars all season at a pretty incredible rate. So it's going to close up eventually. And I just don't throw Formula One in the bin just yet. I promise, stick with it. It'll get better and you will continue to love it.
I mean, we will. Like I said, software patch may be required, but I know that they're working on it as we're probably talking right now. I'm sure there is a team somewhere trying to write code to figure these things out. I would say definitely stick with it. The sport, as I've said many times before, and I almost felt like the race going into the race was one of those moments that the sport needed to give it to you when you least expected it. So it always does. It always tends to do that. And even like when your hope is gone, like it comes back and hits you over the head with something that'll be really fun. So there's a lot of different tracks. We're still excited. We're still going to be here. We'll cover it. We'll bring it all to you. We'll do our best to try to explain what we think we're seeing. And hopefully the TV will start to do that somewhat as well. So for Cody, it's been Andy. Thank you for sticking with us as always. And take care of yourselves out there, folks. It's a crazy world. May all your laps be fast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Outlap F1 podcast. If you like what you heard, click that subscribe button and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. If you want to connect with us outside of the show, check out our website at www.outlapf1.com. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at OutlapF1 Podcast or email us at chatnow@outlapf1.com. As always, thank you so much for your support and we'll see you on the next one.